Hey there, lovely soul. Welcome back to Noah's Stories. Have you ever made a sacrifice so big that it changed the course of your life? Or someone else's? Today, we dive into a story of resilience, sacrifice, and unexpected love. Let's journey together into the quiet hills of Silver Hollow, where a single choice could alter everything. Silver Hollow was not a place for the faint of heart. Emily Carter grew up in a rickety wooden house clinging precariously to a hillside, where the cold wind seeped through every crack and the scent of damp earth never left the air. Her father, Robert Carter, a former coal miner with calloused hands and a stooped back, scraped by with odd jobs whenever he could find them, patching leaking roofs, unloading shipments at the depot, anything that could bring in a few spare dollars. Every winter, his heavy, rattling cough echoed through their home, a cruel reminder of the dark years he spent underground. Her mother, Linda Carter, spent her life hunched over a battered sewing machine, her eyes permanently shadowed from endless sleepless nights, sewing clothes for townsfolk. The meager coins she earned barely covered cheap bread, old potatoes, and, if fortune smiled, a little scrap of meat. Luxuries had no place in their lives. From a young age, Emily understood hunger intimately. She would quietly push her small share of food onto her younger brother Evan's plate, the frail boy prone to lingering illnesses. "I already ate, you go ahead," she would say, forcing a reassuring smile even as her own stomach twisted in protest. After supper, Emily often retreated to the creaky old porch swing, gazing at the dark, brooding mountains on the horizon, whispering small, desperate dreams that someday her family would no longer have to count every penny just to survive. Amid the bleak gray of poverty, Emily Carter clung to the only fragile hope her parents had always believed in: education. Linda often repeated, her voice hoarse with exhaustion, "That diploma is your ticket out of here, Emily." Emily held on to those words like a drowning person grasping a life preserver. She buried herself in her books, studying under the dim, flickering light of their crumbling house. Long, sleepless nights, gnawing hunger, all endured for a single goal: to change her fate. And finally, her determination bore fruit. Emily earned a partial scholarship to a nearby state college, majoring in accounting. Her 2 years at college were a grueling blur of classes, part-time jobs, and scraping by on student loans. She dreamed of spreadsheets, of a small business she could build with her own hands, of the day her mother could set aside her sewing, her father could breathe freely again, and Evan could look ahead to a bright future. Yet those dreams remained distant, shimmering mirages on the far-off mountains, as harsh reality always threatened to pull her back down to earth. Emily returned to Silver Hollow with a diploma tucked into her suitcase and a heart full of unripe dreams. She had once believed that if she worked hard enough, the world outside would open its arms to her, that new doors would swing wide in welcome. But harsh reality shattered those fragile illusions faster than she could rebuild them. The stable jobs in the nearby city had long been spoken for, snatched up by those with the right last names or the right connections. Emily, armed only with determination and a degree from a modest community college, seemed invisible to them. She sent out applications everywhere: banks, small offices, retail shops. But each time, the answer came back cold and curt. With every rejection, Emily's steps grew heavier. Her confidence chipped away bit by bit. Days blurred into one another as she trudged through the dusty streets of town, clutching a worn folder of resumes that nobody seemed to want. Slowly, a bitter truth sank in. Sometimes, hard work simply wasn't enough to break free. At last, Emily accepted the only job available: a bank teller position at the tiny branch in the heart of Silver Hollow, a job that required no degree, no dreams, only the ability to count money and paste on a tired smile. Day after day, Emily sat behind the thick pane of glass, watching the same weary faces shuffle in to deposit checks, withdraw cash, beg for small loans. The clatter of coins, the whir of receipt printers. These sounds became the dull, ceaseless rhythm of her days. In rare moments, when she lifted her gaze from the counter and looked out the dusty bank window, Emily would glimpse the distant gray mountains lining the horizon. The dreams she once nursed of a cozy shop, of her family secure and smiling, now drifted farther and farther away, like mist dissolving into the sky. A quiet, gnawing fear took root in her soul. Perhaps this, the endless cycle of dreary days, forced smiles and meager paychecks, was all life would ever offer her. Daniel Whitmore drifted into Emily's life like a soft breeze stirring the stillness of her monotonous days. He appeared almost daily at the tiny bank branch where she worked. An elderly man, neatly dressed, his silver hair always carefully combed, his demeanor tinged with solitude and quiet restraint. At first, Emily barely paid him any mind. Among the countless weary, indifferent faces she encountered each day, Daniel seemed no different. But slowly, she began to notice the small things. How he always chose the quietest hours to visit, how the sharp blue of his eyes held stories left untold, carrying a sadness time had failed to erase. Daniel was never in a hurry. His transactions were simple, almost trivial. Depositing a small sum, exchanging a few bills, errands hardly worth the trip. Yet each time, he would leave a generous tip in the battered donation cup by the counter. $5, $10, sometimes even $20. "For you, Miss Carter. For your dedication," he would say, his voice low and courteous, his gaze warm and strangely steady. In fleeting moments, Emily glimpsed something very real in Daniel. Something unlike the pitying stare she had grown used to from the townsfolk. He didn't look at her as a failed girl trapped in Silver Hollow. He looked at her as a person, someone with worth, with dreams still smoldering beneath the weight of hardship. In some quiet, unexplainable way, Daniel's gentle presence offered Emily a sliver of comfort amidst the bleakness. She couldn't fully understand why, but each time the bank door chimed and she saw his figure crossing the threshold, a small knot of loneliness inside her loosened. As if, in a world washed dull by hardship, someone still saw her, listened to her, and understood the ache she had long ago learned to silence. That evening, Daniel Whitmore did not simply walk into the bank as he usually did. He requested a private conversation and asked if he might visit Emily's home the following night. Hesitant, puzzled, but also quietly curious, Emily agreed, wondering all the while what a man like him could possibly want from someone like her. When Daniel's sleek black car pulled up in front of the Carter family's weathered house, the air grew thick with suspicion and unease. Robert stood at the porch, his worn face carved into a mask of wary caution. Linda nervously wiped her hands on her apron, attempting a semblance of hospitality. Evan hovered at the door, his young face tight with concern. Daniel stepped out, carrying a large basket brimming with luxuries the Carters hadn't seen in years. Thick cuts of steak, imported cheeses, fresh fruits, and glossy wrapped chocolates. "Just a small token," he said warmly, setting the basket on their battered, oilcloth-covered table. Without much preamble, after a few strained pleasantries, Daniel turned to Emily. His eyes, usually so tired, now burned with cold clarity. "Mr. Carter," he began, his voice firm yet respectful, "I will speak plainly. I am a man who has known much of life and loneliness. I have come to admire your strength, your resilience, and the deep loyalty you show to your family." Emily sat frozen while Robert shifted uneasily in his chair. Daniel raised a calming hand. "Therefore, I wish to propose marriage," he said, each word dropping into the thick, tense air like heavy stones. "I do not ask for love. I seek companionship, respect. In return, I will see to your family's needs, your father's health, Evan's education, a proper home for all of you." The room spun. The promises, an end to hunger, to cold, to fear, were too sweet, too tangible, and yet came at a cost that made Emily's chest tighten painfully. She glanced at her father, seeing pride and anguish warring in his weary eyes. Linda clutched her apron tighter, her hands trembling. Evan stood, pale and silent in the doorway. Daniel waited. He did not plead, did not pressure. He simply placed his offer before them, heavy as a verdict, or perhaps as an unrefusable mercy. "You do not need to answer tonight," he said softly after a long pause. "I will return in 3 days. Please consider carefully." Then he rose, bowed slightly with dignified restraint, and departed into the cooling evening, leaving behind a house steeped in suffocating silence, and a basket of impossible choices lying stark and silent on the worn kitchen table. That night, Emily barely slept. She lay stiffly on her creaky old bed, staring up at the water-stained ceiling, where each spreading mark seemed to whisper questions she dared not answer. 3 days. Daniel had given her 3 days to decide the course of her life and that of her entire family. In Emily's mind, vivid images flickered relentlessly. Her father, Robert, coughing violently through the freezing winter nights, his calloused hands trembling as he tried to patch their leaking roof. Her mother, Linda, with dark circles etched permanently under her eyes, sewing desperately through endless nights to buy Robert's medication. And Evan, her frail younger brother. She had sworn to herself that she would save them, that she would pay whatever price was necessary. But now, the price seemed unbearable. Some small part of Emily, the part that once dreamed, that once believed in love, screamed against this choice. She did not love Daniel. She barely knew him beyond his quiet melancholy and courteous ways. The thought of binding herself for life to a man she did not love twisted her stomach into knots. Yet, what was worse, sacrificing her youth and her dreams, or watching her family sink deeper into hopelessness? The next morning, beneath a gray, heavy sky, Emily found her mother outside, slowly pinning threadbare clothes to the sagging clothesline. Every movement Linda made was heavy, labored, as if she bore the weight of the entire world. "What should I do, Mom?" Emily asked, her voice shaking. Linda paused, turned to her. In her weary, time-worn face, Emily saw an infinite gentleness. "This is your life, Emily," Linda said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "Don't do anything just for us if it will make you miserable. Somehow we'll make it through. We always do." But Emily knew better. She knew that making it through meant enduring the same endless grind, the same crushing fear of what tomorrow might bring. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, Emily sat at the wobbly kitchen table, facing her parents and brother, her hands trembling in her lap. She drew a deep, steadying breath. "I've made my decision," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "I will say yes." The room seemed to freeze. Robert closed his eyes. Linda wept quietly. Evan slammed his palm against the table and shot to his feet, his eyes burning with helplessness. But Emily sat firm, silent, a soldier accepting the battlefield she had chosen, even if the cost would be nothing less than her own heart. The wedding day arrived under a heavy, gray mist, as cold and bleak as Emily's own heart. She stood before the cracked mirror in her old bedroom, staring at the unfamiliar reflection. The second-hand white dress, clumsily altered by her mother's tired hands, looked faded and tired under the dim, uneven light. Holding a small bouquet of wildflowers Evan had gathered that morning, Emily stepped into the town's tiny church, a place where peeling walls and faded stained glass windows could not hide the marks of time. Daniel Whitmore waited at the end of the aisle, dignified in a dark suit. Emily walked toward him, each step heavy, her arm clinging tightly to Robert's, as if seeking an anchor against the inevitable. When she spoke her vows, her voice trembled, catching painfully in her throat. A soft sob escaped as Daniel slid the heavy gold wedding band onto her finger. Silent tears streamed down her cheeks, mistaken by the few guests, some neighbors, and Daniel's lawyer, as tears of joy. Only Emily knew the truth. They were the tears of a dream being buried forever. After the cold, hollow wedding, Daniel drove Emily to his mansion, a grand, imposing structure, as empty and silent as the space inside her heart. The vast house swallowed her small figure whole, each footstep echoing like a reminder of how misplaced she truly was. Daniel politely wished her good night and disappeared down the dim hallway. Emily collapsed onto the edge of the silk-covered bed, feeling utterly adrift. Wrapped in the soft robe he had provided, she felt more like a bird trapped in a gilded cage than a bride. As night deepened, Emily heard the soft sound of running water from the adjoining bathroom. Worry gnawed at her. Daniel, whom she still believed was an old man, could have fallen. Hesitant, she tapped lightly on the door. No response. Her heart pounding, she slowly pushed the door open, and the world tilted violently off its axis. Bathed in the bright white light stood a young man, perhaps in his 30s, lean and strong, damp dark hair falling across his forehead, and those same sharp blue eyes watching her with concern. Emily staggered back, slamming into the wall. "Who are you?" she gasped, panic flooding her voice. The man extended a hand toward her, his voice low and urgent. "Emily, please." "Don't be afraid. It's me, Daniel. I can explain." Frozen in place, her chest heaving, Emily stared at him. Daniel hastily pulled on a robe, stepping toward her carefully. His voice cracked with emotion as he began. "I disguised myself as an old man to fulfill my grandfather's dying wish." Seeing her trembling, he pressed on, his words coming fast, desperate. "Months ago, my grandfather, a wealthy but lonely man, visited Silver Hollow. He wasn't feeling well and happened to stop by the bank where you worked." Daniel's eyes glowed with the memory. "You helped him carry his heavy bags to his car. You stayed by him until he regained his breath. You smiled at him. And when he offered you a tip, you refused. You were simply kind." Emily's breath caught in her throat. A faint, forgotten memory surfaced. The frail old man, the heavy bags, the small, tired smile she had given him. "My grandfather never forgot you," Daniel whispered. "When he died, he left a strange request. That I find you, test your heart, and if your kindness was true, to choose you as my partner." Emily hugged herself tightly, feeling as if the ground beneath her feet had cracked wide open. Everything she thought she knew had shifted, and yet, somewhere in the rubble of her world, a faint glimmer of something new, something terrifying and real, began to stir. A storm of emotions rose violently inside Emily, fierce and chaotic. She hugged herself tightly, every nerve trembling. Betrayed, tested like an object. She had sacrificed her dreams, her youth, her very future, for a marriage born out of lies. Tears welled up, burning and bitter. You played with my life," Emily choked out, her voice breaking with rage. "Everything I endured was just a test for you." Daniel dropped to his knees before her, pain etched deep in his features. "And you doing exercise to help you heal?" "At first, yes," he confessed in a broken whisper. "But then I saw the real you, your strength, your kindness, your selfless love. I didn't just respect you, Emily, I fell in love with you. Truly." Emily clutched the robe tighter around her, her heart torn between two wild, warring forces, searing pain and the aching need to believe. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that after all the deceit, there was still something pure and simple, that he loved her for who she truly was. But the wound inside her was too raw, too deep. Emily turned her face away, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. Daniel remained kneeling there, motionless, waiting, as if he understood that in this moment, every choice now belonged to her. A heavy silence filled the room, pressing down on Emily's chest like lead. She sat there, silent tears tracing down her cheeks, listening to the shallow sound of her own breathing in the vast, suffocating space. Slowly, Emily lifted her head. Daniel's eyes were still on her, not pleading, not justifying, simply waiting, waiting for her to decide. In those eyes, Emily saw pain, regret, and something so raw and genuine it made her heart ache. She swallowed hard, words breaking apart inside her throat. "You made a terrible mistake," she said, her voice rough with emotion. "But I see the real you too." Daniel held his breath, hope flickering in his weary gaze. Slowly, Emily extended her hand, her fingers trembling. "I can't promise to forgive you right away," she whispered. "But if we start again, with honesty this time." A shaky, almost disbelieving smile broke across Daniel's face. He took her hand, holding it gently, as if she were the most precious thing he had ever touched. And in that fragile moment, amidst the rubble of betrayal and broken dreams, a small seed of hope took root. From the moment Emily took Daniel's hand, everything began to change. Daniel kept his promises not with words alone, but through real, tangible actions. He brought Robert to the big city, hiring the best doctors to treat the lung disease that had plagued him for years. The relentless coughing that once haunted their nights faded away. For the first time in years, Robert could step onto the porch and draw in a deep breath without pain. Soon after, Daniel bought the Carter family a small but sturdy house just outside of Silver Hollow. The new home had a strong roof, bright white walls, and a sun-drenched garden, luxuries they had never dared dream of before. Evan was not forgotten. Daniel sponsored his enrollment at a prestigious trade school. The light that had once dimmed in Evan's eyes now burned brightly again, fueled by hope and purpose. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant mountains, Emily leaned her head against Daniel's shoulder on the porch of their new home. She closed her eyes, listening to Evan's laughter and the soft whisper of the breeze through the blooming flowers. In that moment, for the first time in so long, Emily no longer felt the heavy fear of tomorrow. For the first time, she dared to believe in a love that was real and a future no longer ruled by survival alone. The road ahead would be long, filled with unknowns, but Emily knew she would not face it alone. Together, they would build a life founded on trust, sacrifice, and, above all, love. And somewhere beyond the mountains, under the same vast sky, a new beginning was waiting. One they would create, side by side. If this story touched your heart even just a little, don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Tell me, have you ever faced a moment where love, sacrifice, or hope changed everything? Subscribe to Noah's Stories for more heartfelt journeys. Until next time, stay kind and keep dreaming.